The radio operator's hand freezes halfway through the dial. Static fractures across his headset like shattered glass, sharp and sudden, loud enough to make him flinch. Somewhere beyond the walls of the hut, beyond the rain and the darkness and the invisible curve of the coast, 11 men are flying blind inside clouds so dense they cannot see their own wingtips. Their fuel gauges are sinking toward zero. They have maybe 20 minutes left, less if the headwind strengthens, less if one engine is damaged, less if panic accelerates their breathing, and with it their consumption. He is 19 years old. What he does in the next 3 minutes will either bring them home or scatter wreckage across the North Sea. March 1944. RAF Coltershall, Norfolk. The sky over East Anglia hangs low and heavy, pressed downward by coastal weather that refuses to lift. A gray ceiling seals the airfield, flattening sound, muting distance. Mosquito bombers return from daylight precision raids over occupied Europe in ragged, thinning groups. Their Merlin engines howl through cloud before the aircraft punch down through the base at barely 200 feet, dark shapes materializing out of nothing and vanishing again toward the perimeter. Some come back with holes punched clean through aluminum skin. Some come back trailing smoke. Some do not come back at all. Inside the radio hut, the air is warm and stale. Tobacco smoke clings to wool uniforms. Sweat beads on foreheads despite the cold outside. Vacuum tubes glow softly behind wire grills, humming with restrained energy. Morse keys chatter in tight, nervous rhythms, dots and dashes flowing like music until you remember that each burst of sound might be a last transmission. The operators sit hunched at their benches, one ear covered by a headset, the other exposed to the room. Pencils scrape across damp notepads as call signs, bearings, and headings are logged in tight columns. Outside, the wind rattles the corrugated roof like loose bones. Navigation over the North Sea is an act of belief. Pilots calculate position using compass headings, airspeed, elapsed time. They estimate drift from wind reports that are already outdated. They count fuel burn down to the gallon. Under clear skies, the math holds together. Under cloud, it becomes an argument with reality. A sustained error of 5 degrees for half an hour can push an aircraft 15 miles off course. 15 miles is the difference between runway lights and black water. Radio direction-finding stations ring the English coastline, each transmitting a steady call sign on medium frequency. Aircraft equipped with loop antennas request bearings. Multiple stations respond. The pilot triangulates the angles, plots his position, corrects course. In theory. In practice, radio waves bend. They reflect. They refract. They scatter through layers of air with different temperatures and pressures. Storms distort them. The ionosphere bends them back toward the Earth at night. Direction-finding equipment assumes straight-line propagation. When that assumption fails, the bearing becomes confidently wrong. On good days, the system works well enough. On bad days, it kills people. The senior operators at Coltershall are men in their 30s and 40s, veterans of pre-war telegraph offices and merchant ships. They carry themselves with the calm assurance of experience. They know which frequencies behave best at dawn. They recognize the sound of a transmitter failing, the cadence of a pilot who is trying very hard not to sound afraid. The junior operators learn by watching. They are told to follow procedure. Stick to the manual. Do not improvise. Radio discipline exists because chaos kills coordination. Every transmission must be logged. Every frequency change must be authorized. The system works because everyone follows the same rules, even when the rules fail them. Among the junior operators is a thin, pale 19-year-old with an unfinished face and a perpetually rumpled uniform. His handwriting is cramped and difficult to read. He arrived at Coltershall 5 months earlier with passing scores in Morse and theory, no operational experience, and a habit of asking questions that irritated his instructors. The older men tolerate him without warmth. He does not drink with them in the mess. He does not trade jokes. He spends his off-duty hours at his bench, pulling apart receiver circuits, measuring components, sketching modifications in a small notebook folded into his breast pocket. He listens to frequencies outside his assignment. He tunes through the noise between channels. He listens as if searching for something the others cannot hear. They call him the tinkerer. When he offers an idea during a briefing, the room goes quiet in the way rooms do when someone has crossed an invisible boundary. The senior operator looks past him and continues speaking as though nothing was said. Later, in the corridor, a flight sergeant gives advice in a low voice. Stay in your lane. Do your job. Don't waste the time of men who've forgotten more about radio than you'll ever learn. The young operator nods, says nothing, returns to his bench. But the problem does not disappear. Aircraft are still getting lost. Crews are still running out of fuel within sight of home. Direction-finding fixes still contradict each other when the weather collapses. Every week, another empty chair in the mess. Every week, another search called off at dawn. The young operator keeps listening. He was born in the Midlands, in a town that existed to supply the post office with electrical components. His father assembled telephone exchanges. His mother wound inductors by hand under flickering lights. The house smelled of solder and machine oil. Dinner conversations revolved around resistance values and transformer hum. He built his first crystal radio before he was 10. At night, he listened to coastal stations and copied weather reports on scraps of paper, storing them in a biscuit tin under his bed. While other boys played football, he sat in the garden shed with headphones clamped tight, logging distant transmissions in careful columns. School bored him. The lessons moved too slowly. The teachers taught from memory, not curiosity. Only physics held his attention, not the classroom version with pulleys and inclined planes, but the living physics of antennas and fields, of invisible waves bending around the world. At 16, he took a job at the local post office engineering depot, repairing trunk line amplifiers and carrier equipment. The work required patience and intuition. He was good at it. When the war came, he could have stayed. Telecommunications were essential. He was exempt. He volunteered anyway. Not for glory. Not for adventure. Because the RAF had radios everywhere, operating under every possible condition, and he wanted to understand them all. Basic training nearly broke him. He could not march properly. His salute was hesitant. His boots were never quite right. But he could disassemble and reassemble a transmitter blindfolded. He could copy Morse at 30 words per minute without error. He could diagnose faults by sound alone. They passed him. He requested assignment to an operational bomber station. They sent him to Cultershaw. By March 1944, the weather turns hostile. A stalled system settles over the North Sea, trapping cold air beneath warmer layers above. Cloud thickens. Signals bend. Bearings lie. And tonight, somewhere in that cloud, 11 men are counting fuel. The radio crackles again. The young operator straightens in his chair, pencil poised, headset pressed tight to his ear. Static fills the gap between order and catastrophe. The young operator learns quickly that wartime radio work has little to do with textbooks. It is pattern recognition. The sound of a calm pilot versus a frightened one. The uneven spacing in Morse that betrays fatigue. The subtle thinning of a signal that suggests a transmitter running on failing electrical power. He begins to hear these differences instinctively, long before he can explain them. He also begins to notice something else. Aircraft reporting identical positions receive wildly different bearings. Crews inbound on clear nights request fixes and are told to fly headings that make no geometric sense. On some evenings, the system behaves flawlessly. On others, it becomes a machine for manufacturing error. He starts keeping a private log. Weather conditions. Time of day. Signal strength. Fading patterns. Bearing accuracy. He cross-references reports from multiple nights, sketching crude diagrams in the margins. Slowly, patterns emerge. Certain atmospheric conditions correlate with distortion. Certain frequencies hold steady while others become unreliable. The errors are not random. They are systematic. One evening, after a long shift, he approaches the senior operator with his notebook. He opens it to a page dense with notes and underlines, points out the correlations, suggests that bearing accuracy could be improved by switching frequencies in real time instead of rigidly adhering to the assigned channel. The senior operator glances down, then closes the notebook without reading. "We follow the manual," he says. But the manual doesn't. The manual, the older man repeats, more firmly, is not optional. The notebook is returned unopened. The young operator goes back to his bench. The idea does not leave him. Radio waves do not travel in straight lines. They bend through layers of air with different temperatures and densities. At night, the ionosphere descends, reflecting medium-frequency signals back toward the Earth. During temperature inversions, signals become trapped in invisible ducts, traveling hundreds of miles farther than expected. Direction-finding equipment assumes none of this. It measures the angle at which a signal arrives and extrapolates backward as though the path were direct. When the signal has been bent, the bearing is wrong. When the signal has been reflected, the bearing is confidently wrong. The engineers know this. They have known it since the 1920s. The system exists anyway because it works most of the time. March 1944 is not most of the time. A high-pressure system settles over the North Sea, locking cold air beneath warmer layers aloft. The inversion creates a radio duct. Stations hundreds of miles apart hear each other clearly. Local transmitters are drowned out by distant ones arriving stronger than physics says they should. Bearings collapse into contradiction. On the night of March 23rd, 6 Mosquitoes return from a raid on a rail yard near Amiens. The strike goes clean. Bombs on target. No losses. The formation turns for home and climbs above cloud into clear air, cruising at 18,000 feet beneath a field of stars. They call for bearings. Coultershaw responds. The fixes place them nearly 20 miles south of where they should be. The pilots correct their heading. The error compounds. By the time they cross the English coast, they are over the Wash instead of Norfolk, drifting farther off course with each minute. Fuel gauges sink toward empty. The lead pilot requests an emergency vector. A heading is transmitted. He follows it. The heading leads them farther north, away from land, toward darkness. One by one, the Mosquitoes descend through cloud searching for reference. 3 break through and land at unfamiliar airfields with tanks nearly dry. 2 belly land in fields, guided down by instinct and luck. 1 does not make it. The aircraft strikes trees at speed. Both men die instantly. The investigation finds no mechanical failure. No pilot error. The cause is listed as navigational uncertainty, which is another way of saying the system failed. The station commander calls a meeting. The senior operators speak of atmospheric unpredictability, of unavoidable degradation, of the limits of technology. There is no reliable way, they say, to know when conditions have become dangerous. All they can do is follow procedure and hope. The young operator raises his hand. The room turns. He stands awkwardly, notebook clutched to his chest, and explains that the problem is not the equipment but the rigidity of the protocol. The assigned frequency becomes unstable under inversion conditions. Other frequencies remain usable. If operators monitored propagation in real time and switched channels accordingly, bearing accuracy could be preserved. The senior operator frowns. That would break coordination. Not if crews are briefed, the young man says. Not if we establish alternates in advance. The station commander leans back. And you believe this would work? I don't know, the young operator says. But I believe it's worth testing. Silence. We'll take it under advisement. The commander says at last. The meeting ends. Nothing changes. That night, alone in the radio hut, the young operator sketches a protocol. Not elegant. Practical. Monitor multiple frequencies continuously. Assess distortion by signal strength and fading. Switch to the cleanest channel when primary degrades. Coordinate directly with direction-finding stations. Brief pilots in advance. It requires judgment, experience, initiative. Everything institutional procedure is designed to suppress. He waits. He waits for a night when the senior operator is off duty. For weather bad enough to matter, but not catastrophic. For a moment when doing nothing feels worse than acting. It comes on April 2nd. Thunderstorms over the North Sea. Heavy cloud. Moderate turbulence. A mosquito strike package inbound just after midnight. He is assigned to the auxiliary position, monitoring a secondary frequency. He listens. The primary channel is unstable. Signals fade unpredictably. Bearings disagree. The lead pilot's voice remains calm, but flat, edged with arithmetic. The primary operator hesitates. The young operator does not. He keys his microphone on the secondary frequency. He has no authority. He transmits anyway. He tells the pilot to switch frequencies. He explains the primary channel is distorted. He says he can give accurate bearings for the next 5 minutes if the pilot trusts him. A pause. Then, Roger. The switch is made. The young operator selects a lower frequency channel he has been monitoring all night. He contacts a direction-finding station directly, bypassing normal protocol, requests a bearing. The response is immediate. Clean. Sharp. He cross-checks with a second station. The bearings agree within 2 degrees. He transmits the corrected heading. Descend to 3,000. Look for the beacon at 10 miles. 8 minutes later, the mosquitoes break through cloud. The beacon is directly ahead. They land without incident. The young operator logs the event, returns to monitoring, says nothing. But the lead pilot files a report. And the next morning, the station commander sends for him. The station commander listens without interrupting. When the young operator finishes, he does not raise his voice or threaten discipline. He asks one question instead. Can this be repeated? Yes, the operator says. If we're allowed to adapt. A 30-day trial is approved. The results are undeniable. During poor weather, bearing accuracy improves. Aircraft that would have been lost return safely. Crews land with fuel fumes in the lines instead of seawater in their lungs. By May 1944, adaptive frequency procedures are quietly adopted across Bomber Command. By June, they are taught in training. By Normandy, every radio hut along the coast knows when to abandon the manual and trust the signal. The young operator is promoted, then reassigned. He never flies a mission. He never receives a medal. His name appears only in logs and technical appendices. After the war, analysts calculate that roughly 60 aircraft were saved by improved navigation during adverse conditions in the spring and summer of 1944. 120 airmen came home who otherwise would not have. He returns to civilian life, installs radio towers, raises a family, and never speaks of the war unless asked. When his son once presses him for stories, he shrugs. I listened, he says, and I told people where to go. Modern aviation now switches frequencies automatically, monitors signal quality continuously, adapts in real time. The technology is advanced. The principle is unchanged. A 19-year-old in a radio hut learned it first. Because sometimes the most important act of courage is not following orders, but knowing exactly when not to.